Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Let's Talk podcast. My name is Drew. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a Meet the Crew series. So over the course of the next couple of videos, you'll see some individuals, and we're going to give you our backgrounds, our history, our upbringing, our diagnosis if we have any with mental illness, and just kind of give you a little bit of insight as to what makes us us and kind of what makes us tick and the inspiration behind the whole thing. So, with that said, my name is Drew. I am the founder and host of Let's Talk. A couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety, and I tell you that openly and honestly to, again, hopefully inspire others to know that it's okay to talk about it. It's okay to share those things. You don't have to hide those. It's nothing to be ashamed of. It's a part of us. It's something that we deal with. So, you know, that's part of this whole thing is breaking that stigma and letting people know that it's okay to talk about. So, I'm going to give you a little bit about my upbringing and my history. One thing I do want everyone to know that in going through these things and sharing them with you, I am not by any shape or form playing the victim. Um, I don't blame anyone for the things that I've gone through, but there are things that kind of helped shape who I am and led to some of these things that I deal with. Um, so just keep that in mind. Like I said, I don't have any ill will towards anyone. Um, I grew up fairly resentful and held on to a lot of anger and hate for a long time, and I'm finally letting that go and forgiving and healing and letting go of some of that bitterness. So, with that said, I grew up in a broken home. My parents split when I was 2 or 3 years old. I was a very young age. Um, my father wasn't around a whole lot. My mom had full custody, and I had visitation rights every other weekend growing up with my father. And there were times where he would either cancel or reschedule and things like wouldn't take his weekends that he was supposed to have. Um, Times that we went down there, to visit with him. There were times where I'd be left in the living room to watch TV or left to my own devices, and he'd be in his room watching TV, kind of thing. So it wasn't like we were going on visitation and we were spending all this time together. It was still kind of an absentee thing, and for a long time growing up, I missed that fatherhood connection. I didn't have a father figure that I could really look up to and teach me, the things that I would need to know to be a man, or that I thought I would need to know to be a man. Um, that led to a lot of issues I had moving forward with other men that came into my mom's life and my family's life. There was a lot of resentment towards them coming in. I was not, I wouldn't say rebellious is the word, but I didn't take too kindly to someone else coming into the family and running the show, so to speak. I looked at it as like, I've been here, who are you? And so that it automatically led to conflict there a lot of times. Sometimes that conflict was verbal. Sometimes there was physical. So there there were times growing up where I dealt with verbal and physical abuse, um, and saw others, verbally and physically abused, and that took a toll on me. Still to this day, I've got some issues you know with fatherly figures and fully trusting and you know making sure that they're going to stay around and they have good intentions and that kind of thing. Um, Outside of that, growing up, other than the broken home, we moved around a lot. Um, my my mom's job took her to different places. Recruiters were calling her, having her come to this job to fix this department, and come to this one and fix this department. Um, and she was very ambitious, and went after for everything that she wanted, and earned everything that she's got. And I don't blame her one bit. I would chase those same opportunities. So, but as a child growing up with that, I counted the other day, I think I went to 16 different schools from kindergarten through graduating high school, which for me, it led to a lot of social anxiety in new environments, and a lack of really ever having anyone close to me for long periods of time. A lot of people nowadays you'll talk to, and they've lived in the same hometown their entire life, or the same county their entire life. And so the people that they grew up with are the people that they're adult friends with, that they know, and they've been together for forever, or so to speak. And I didn't really have that luxury. With as much as we moved around, I was constantly adapting and trying to fit into new crowds. And you know what was cool and hip at one school, you were bullied for at the next school, and that classified as a nerd or a geek, or things of that nature, where it was tough finding somewhere where you belong. I was also overweight for the majority of my life, so I dealt with a lot of bullying, again, trouble fitting in, and could never really truly be myself. I was trying to find that crowd to fit into. Um, so between the father figures and the moving around, um, it put me on the defensive a lot. I was someone that I was constantly standing up for myself, whether I was right or wrong. I just you know of course, as a kid, as a teen, even as a young adult, I always thought that I knew best. I was in the right, and I was going to fight for that. And so I did. And so whether it was defending myself, or taking on that role for others, people that were close to me, whether it be family or friends that either couldn't or wouldn't defend themselves, I found myself stepping into that role, and taking up for them, which again, by nature, leads to conflict. If you're constantly on the defensive, and you're constantly fighting off people, and pushing them away, it's hard to get close to people. It's hard for people to get close to you, because you've always got that edge. So that in itself was probably one of the biggest things, at least into my young adult life, that really impacted me. Um, Going through the broken home, and not having the father figure around, um, and never really fitting in school. It was tough. It was very hard. I lashed out. I was an angry kid a lot, and a lot of that just came from a lack of understanding of life. Like, again, I didn't blame my mom. I didn't blame my dad at the time. I didn't understand. Why didn't my dad want to spend time with me? Why didn't he want to be around? Why didn't he call? Why were we moving so much? Why do we have to leave this school and go to this school, or leave this city and go to this city? There were things that I questioned, and like I said, it kept me always searching for home. Uh, so growing up, I did finally get a chance to kind of make my own decision and settle, and found a find a place to call home, and settle in Southern Indiana. I got married at a young age, just I think around 21, 22, somewhere around there. It was very, very young, or what I consider to be young anyway. We were high school sweethearts, so we dated all through high school, and then I moved, and she went to college, and we kind of we split up. A few years later, we found each other again, and we got back together, and it was like, hey, it's got to be fate, We dated all this time, we separated, and then we came back and found each other. It's got to be right. Like that's destiny. That's fate calling you back to each other. And it lasted about a year, and to this day, that was probably still one of the most heartbreaking insta relationship that I've ever had. Um, and I won't give you the full details, but there was a pretty massive lie in that relationship. Um, I've always had a dream and a goal of being a father. Um, Given my upbringing and my lack of a true father figure that was always around, um, that's always been a big dream of mine. Still is a big dream of mine. I want nothing more than to have a child of my own to raise and kind of give them that relationship that I didn't get. So that played a big part in that first relationship. And when when that broke down, when which if we're being honest, I'll go ahead and just let you know. So my wife at the time had told me that she was pregnant. I was working a full time job. She was working a full time job. We barely saw each other in passing. We both had weird schedules. So when she would have doctor's appointments, I was always conveniently unavailable. Um, I didn't think anything of it. I trusted her, and I trusted what she was telling me. I was that naive young kid that didn't know any better, and she was I mean, she wasn't big, but she was a bigger person. So um, it was one of those things where she didn't or wouldn't have shown as much with the pregnancy, and so we went through all of the steps, right? She's going to the doctor's office. She's getting checkups. We're doing on the vitamins, the whole regimen, everything. We went through baby showers. We got her, a nice crib. My mom had crocheted a bedding set for her with her name initialed on it. I went to Build a Bear and built this little bear and recorded my voice for her when she was born, um, so that she had that had that as like a first memento and something to comfort her, and that to me was something that was really special. That you know again, things that I'd always wanted to do, and I was so excited to have a child. And I remember we had invited my mom over for Father's Day, and at this point, my wife was going to be due at any time. Um, Matter of fact, I think at that point she was a week or two away from being due. So my mom comes over, and they give me this first Father's Day card, and they're expecting father, and really sweet card. And we sat down, we had lunch, and had a good time. And when my parents left, the expression on my wife's face at the time um, just changed, and she's like, "Sit down, we need to have a talk." And I said, "Okay." And I was just kind of confused because like we were all just happy and laughing and having a good time and celebrating Father's Day, and all of a sudden, just with a click, it got serious. And she said, I need to tell you something." I said, "Okay." And she's like, "I went to the doctor the other day, and I've had a miscarriage." And I was distraught. I was just absolutely just in shambles. Um, she had tried to comfort me, and I was inconsolable. And I remember calling my mom, and in tears, could barely talk. I was just frantic. And I told her what my wife had told me, and she said, "Drew, where are you right now?" And I was like, I'm in my kitchen." And she's like, "I need you to go sit down." I said, "Okay." And I was like, "What's going on?" And just to preface this, my mom is in the medical field. She's been in the medical field her entire life. Um, so she sat down with me on the phone, and she was like, "Has she been to the hospital?" And I said, "Other than her doctor's appointments, not that I know of." And she proceeded to tell me, with this type of procedure, or with with a miscarriage this late, the procedure to have that done would have required a hospital visit and an overnight. It's not something that just happens and you walk out and you're fine. You go to work the next day. It's something that's very physically painful and emotionally taxing. So I knew right then and there, once my mama told me that the entire pregnancy had been a lie. And I started to question everything, because it wasn't one of those where it was a pregnancy to entice me to marry her or anything like that. We were already married. We were trying for a child. So I don't know if it was that I wanted a child so badly that she was trying to appease me. And, I, to this day, I don't know what would drive a person to do that to another human being. But that it was heartbreaking, to know that not only was I not having a daughter that I was so incredibly looking forward to now I have my high school sweetheart and my first wife, that we had a relationship at that point that was built on a lie. And I went back and was questioning everything in our relationship, what through high school, through fighting each other again. Like I began to wonder what was real and what wasn't. And I didn't see a way forward. I didn't see a way of getting past it. Um, I was really too broken at that point, and we called it off, and we got a divorce. Um, After that, we were living in a townhome at the time, and she moved out, moved back in with her parents, I think, and then eventually moved on. But I stayed in the townhome for a bit by myself, and I was in a really dark space. Um, I didn't trust myself being alone. So, um, a very good friend of mine from school, her and her husband invited me to stay with them for a short time to kind of get back on my feet and find myself again, and get back to who I was, because I was generally a pretty happy-go-lucky, like just goofball, just always having fun, and I had lost that. I'd lost my smile, I'd lost my laugh. I wasn't eating. I was drinking very heavily, very heavily. Um, and they saw that and were concerned, and brought me in with them so that I wouldn't be alone. So over the course of the next couple of months, of staying with them, they introduced me to what would end up being my second wife, and things were great. Um, Again, uh, we took it very slow, because I let her know, and my friends had let her know, about everything that I'd gone through, everything I'd been through. So it was a long process. I told her from the get go. I was like, you know, I'm not jumping into anything soon, because I can't. I'm not in that place. I don't know if I will be in that place, and it took me a long time to eventually get to a point where I was okay and move forward. And so, and I think we dated for 6 or 7, probably not, about 4 or 5 years, um, and then married. Um, and we were married for about 7 years, 8 years, and this is the most recently. At the end of 2021, that summer, um, I was on the computer in our study, and I was just browsing the web before going to bed. I was working night shift, so I was home that morning, just kind of browsing and kind of killing time, browsing Facebook, ESPN, stuff like that. And I've never been one to like check messages or DMs or anything like that. I've never had a reason to, and I'm not that person. Um, but when I was on the computer, there was a message that had popped up on her profile, and something that day had told me to click on it. And I probably shouldn't have. I probably should have invaded her privacy like that. Um, but in doing so, I found evidence that she had been seeing somebody while married to me. She had been seeing somebody in Indianapolis. She traveled for work a lot, so she would go on these field visits and things up in like central Indiana, northern Indiana. So she was constantly away from home, and so I found evidence, and I I called her um, and just asked her point blank. I was like, "Is there anything that you need to talk to me about or tell me about?" And she questioned. She's like, "What are you talking about?" No, and was just immediately in denial. And she ended up coming home from work, and um, and I confronted her, and I was like, "Are you sure there's nothing that you want to tell me?" And when I asked her who was so and so, her face just changed, and it was just an immediate excuse. Oh, that's an old friend that lives in Indy, and we met up for lunch one day. And I was like, "Are you sure it's it?" And I told her, I was like, "The more you talk, the more things are going to come out. The more you're going to let slip, the more the story's going to change, and the more you're going to have to backtrack. So you might as well be honest with me." And she still kept denying, and eventually, as she kept trying to deny and make excuses, those excuses didn't didn't coincide with each other. There were holes in the story, and I pointed that out. And I was like, "I told you that as you keep as you keep trying to explain yourself, you're gonna let more slip." I was like, "So you might as well tell me." And so she eventually did break down. She's like, "It started as a lunch, just hanging out, and he did get flirty, and I told him that I was married, and he continued to get flirty, and the next time I went up there, we hugged. Um, then we did kiss once." And she's like, "But I swear that's it." And I still to this day, I don't believe that was it, but I have my peace with it now. And I'm not trying to relive that, or revisit it, or throw any more mud on anybody. Just kind of explaining where I came from, and that, and how it impacted me. And so I didn't immediately leave, um, because I'd already been through it one time, and I wasn't gonna go through it again. Like, I was like, "I'm gonna figure this out." So we agreed on a separation, and I moved in with mom. She lived about 15 minutes down the road from us. Um, while I was trying to kind of sort through everything, and the more I was alone with my thoughts and trying to figure things out, you know, I found myself, you know, blaming myself, that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't do enough to keep her, that I didn't do enough to make her happy, and I owned a lot of that, and I still do to this day. Um, but that's one thing I've struggled with my entire life is I don't feel like I'm good enough for anyone. I don't I don't feel like there's I mean, I don't think there's enough that I can do to ever be enough, and it's something that I'm working through, but I'm probably gonna carry my entire life. Um, but with consulting with family and with friends, it all kind of came back to me. Um, it's like, well, do you think you can get past it? If so, you guys can work on it. But if you can't get past it, and that's what ultimately led me to the decision to pursue the divorce, is I told her that at this point in my life, I didn't want to spend the next 3, 4, 10 years trying to get past something and make things work, and to ultimately decide they weren't going to. I didn't want to waste that many years trying to regain trust that I shouldn't have lost. And things were somewhat amicable at first when we split. Um, there was some mutual heartbreak there, but things were at least not friendly, but it was peaceful. Like I said, it was amicable. It wasn't. I tried to not hold a resentment and bitterness towards her, but once we both found somebody else, there was a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of bitterness. There's a lot of pettiness and anger, and it was destructive really quick. So when I found my current fiance, um, again, things have been great there. Um, we have had our issues, but they've been in a much healthier place where we can actually both talk to each other and figure things out and sort through it. Um, and I think that's been really important because I was upfront with her the entire time about things that I'd been dealing with, things that I've gone through, and she was completely understanding from the get go. And so anytime that we've had an issue, um, anytime that I've either lashed out or I've been distant or um, said something out of line. Um, again, I didn't make an excuse for it, but I was able to kind of explain where I was coming from. And she's been gracious enough to understand that and probably give me more grace than I deserve. So I'm very thankful for that and thankful for where I'm at. Um, we decided about a year ago to just pack up for a fresh start. Came to Alabama from Indiana, and it's been a great decision. It's we've both enjoyed it down here. Um, we've both loved the change of scenery and the clean slate. Um, but in itself, it has brought its own challenges. I came down for a new career and a lot of promises and things from the new employer that, quite frankly, haven't been held up at this point. But I know that I'm going to have you know the career issues anywhere you go. So it's not something that I'm like I regret coming down here because it's not what I wanted, because it absolutely is what I want. But I think the hardest part about being down here and having that clean slate and having the change of scenery is just being so far away, knowing that it's just me and her. And while we have each other, and that's great, you know, if her and I were to have an issue, and I wanted to call call up a buddy and go and talk, or call my family, it's 6 hours away, and it's just not feasible. And even not even necessarily with issues with her, but just I've had issues in general. And like, you know what, I need to have a weekend where I can just go chill with my guys, or go visit family and just relax and kick back, that kind of thing, or go after work and have a drink. And I can't do that. Um, of course, there's always a phone call, and I know that there's friends back home that if I ever needed, I could call and they'd be there. But being someone that is a survivor of an unaliving attempt, knowing how vital it is to have someone that you can call and they can be there in 10 minutes was something that it scared me. It still scares me. I mean, not that I'm at that point, but knowing when I was and I had someone and I knew that they would drop everything they were doing, and they would be there. And there was an individual that was there, that I thank for their, and I credit them for still being here, and I can still be here and share my story with you today. But I had never once would have dreamed it'd be this hard being away from people, um, especially with the issues from growing up, where I had the social anxieties from the different schools and being bullied, and I'll always being on the defensive. It's not easy for me to go out and mingle in a crowd and make new friends. There are people I know that they can walk into a store or a restaurant and can walk out with 5 new friends because they're just that charismatic. And I don't have that ability. I don't have that skill. It takes me a long time to open up and to trust people. And so that's been tough. But it's something that I'm working through. It's part of why I created this project, is so that selfishly I could keep in contact with my guys. It gives me a reason, to stay up with them, and it holds me accountable. Uh, for one, to know that they're relying on me to help kind of lead this thing, and they're relying on me to contact them to give them schedules and plans and things like that, and relying on me to check on them the same way they're going to check on me. That's part of the whole thing. Is we created this so that we could check on each other and support each other. So it's kind of holding each other accountable, holding ourselves accountable, and making sure that we talk about it, making sure that we talk about things that we're struggling with and that we're dealing with. And again, that's why I started this whole thing, is that, and to open up with you guys about all of this, about my life history and story, is not an easy thing. It's not something I take lightly. Um, it's not something that I particularly want the world to know, but I think it's important in the grand scheme of things to open up and tell those stories. And I'm sure as we go on, my friends and I will probably go deeper into some of these stories, and we'll probably go into more detail. We're going to deep dive and really get into it. And there's probably going to be some hard stuff and some painful stuff, um, but we're going to get through it. We're going to fight through it, and we're going to, you know, fight each battle and go on to the next day. And if there's one thing that I want anybody to take from this is that no matter what you're going through, no matter what you've been through, you are enough, you are worthy, you are strong enough to do this. You are strong enough to win that battle. Even if that battle is waking up tomorrow, you've got this. We can do this. And for me, for a long time, that's what it was is I've just got to see tomorrow because I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. There could be great things on the horizon, and I owe it to a lot of people to stick around and find out. So that's what we're here for. We're here to stick around. We're here to fight. We're here to win those battles, and none of us can do it alone. So I hope that in this little bit of background, this bio, that it gives you guys kind of a glimpse and maybe even a little bit of hope that regardless of what you've gone through, there is hope. There's a tomorrow. The sun's going to come up, and you can grow through it. Matter of fact, the shirt that I'm wearing right now says "Grow through what you go through." So don't let those experiences and the things that have defined you, don't let them define you. Grow from it, and you define the things that happen to you, the things that you went through. You say, "Yeah, I went through that, and it sucked. But you know what? Out of that, I gained courage. I gained strength. You know, I gained a love that I never thought I'd find, and because it's out there, and it's there for the taking." So just take that and hopefully be encouraged and know that you're not alone.